Welcome to Carly Tackle's Planter Box Light Pole. Here's a quick look at what we're going to build today. To start this project off, we need to build our planter box first. The materials that we're going to use to build a planter box are 2x3s and 1x4s. Our 2x3 boards are going to serve as our frame for our planter boxes, and our 1x4s are going to be cut to go around the outside and will be stained for a prettier finish. I need 4 25-inch long boards, 2 13-inch long boards, and 2 15-inch long boards. For most of our 1x4 boards, we will need to adjust our miter saw's bevel gauge to 45-degree angles so that we can make these angle cuts on both sides. And we're going to be making 28 of these boards, 7 per side. The rest of our 1x4s will be used for the top frame as well as the base for the soil in our planter box. After you cut your 28 boards for the outside of your planter box, the next thing to do is to cut the boards that go inside of the planter box that will hold your liner for your soil. One thing to keep in mind is if you come across boards that have knots that go all the way through, you really don't want those on the outside of your planter box, so just save them for the inside ones, and that's what I did here. So I'll cut this down to fit inside of the planter box. Now it's time to drill some pocket holes into our frame support boards. You should have 2 13-inch boards and 2 15-inch boards. These are the ones we'll be drilling 2 pocket holes on each side. I'm going to be using the Craig system. If you haven't used one, I would recommend it. It makes drilling pocket holes way easier. Now it's time to attach our support boards to our legs. We want to measure up from the bottom of our legs 15 inches to allow room for our 5-gallon buckets to go underneath. Most 5-gallon buckets are under 15 inches, but you might want to measure yours to double check. When assembling your frame, you want to pay close attention to which support bars you're using. You want to make sure that your frame is 18 inches wide from outside to outside. Don't accidentally switch these boards up. To attach these boards to the legs, I'm going to be using external screws by Craig that are designed to be used with these pocket holes that we made earlier. I finished attaching all my support beams to my legs, and I flipped it upside down. Now it's time to attach the 1x4s that we cut earlier to be our outside. By flipping it upside down, it helps me line up the top with a flat surface. You may notice that I have these side boards clamped to the base, and this is to help me line up my first board to ensure that my corners on my planters are nice. Another reason that we're starting from the top and working our way to the bottom is we plan to have a little gap at the bottom to allow for water to drain. So starting at the top, making sure it's flush, will ensure I get the right gap at the bottom. To attach these sideboards to the frame, I'm going to be using my finished nailer with my air compressor. Finished with the one side, left a little gap at the bottom. Now I'm going to turn it and do one more side, but then I'm going to stop. It's easier to do your flats in the planter box if you can still get in from the sides, and I'll show you that step next. I have my two sides on my frame, and now I'm laying out the boards for the bottom of the planter box. It should take 5 of these 1x4 boards to go across. If you use 5, you're going to have a 1/4 inch gap on each side, so make sure you measure that out. What I'm doing right now is marking where my support beams will cut into the boards. So I know that my support beams are 2.5 inches deep, so I'm drawing that out on these boards, and I will be using a jigsaw to cut out these little pieces so I can fit snugly around them. I'm using clamps to hold the board in place as I use the jigsaw to cut out these sections. One thing I failed to do was account for the 1/4 inch gap that I need, so this board will go all the way to the side. Originally I wanted a 1/4 inch gap. I'm using a rubber mallet to help hit the board into place because it should be a snug fit, and then I'm using my finish nailer to tap it into place. Now you'll notice I only have 4 boards laid out here. I'm actually 1 short, and I will add it later. For your 5th board, you would cut it out just like I showed you on the first one and then nail that in as well. Now I'm measuring where the 4x4 post that we will use as our light pole will go through the planter box. I found the center and am measuring out the 3.5 by 3.5 that make it out. I then will drill a hole into the corners and use a jigsaw to cut out the square. After I finish cutting out the square, I'm going to take a scrap piece of 4x4 board and test out the hole to make sure it's wide enough. If your hole is not wide enough, just take your jigsaw, cut a little bit more out, or if it's very close, use some sandpaper. But you want to make sure you have some extra gap because we also are going to have a liner that's going to fit down there snug. So you want a little extra room for that 4x4 to play. Now it's time to put on the remaining sides. Now that I have all the sideboards attached to the base, I'm going to use wood filler to fill in the holes from the nails and also make the edges nice and smooth. After that, sanding and staining. While I'm waiting for the wood filler to dry in the planter box, I start on the boards that are going to sit on top of the planter box. I'm cutting these at a 45-degree angle using my Bosch miter saw. While you're waiting for your stain to dry on your planter box, you can go ahead and cut out the liner. Now for a liner today, I'm using a shower pan liner because it was lesser expensive than some of the other things I saw, and I really didn't need that much. For a planter box, you need about 36 inches by 36 inches wide. So I'm going to measure that out, draw it with a marker, and then cut it out. Once you have your 36 by 36 liner cut out, I'm going to be using a 12-inch speed square to mark the corners. You'll see that this will help you later when stapling in your planter box. So measure 9 inches in from each corner and draw boxes. Once you have a box drawn, we are going to draw a line from the outside corner to the inside corner of the box, only the one direction. Alright, I got all my boxes drawn with my lines. Now comes the part to mark out which flaps we're going to cut out. We're not going to cut out the entire box, just one of the little triangles. So we're going to pick one side to have the flaps. So we'll pick this side. So that means we're going to cut out the flap mark on the other one. And then since this has the side with the flaps, our opposite side is going to have a flap. So we're going to cut out the opposite ones. Alright, so when you're looking at this, these two sides have these extra little wings. And so does this two sides, where these are just the box. So when we put it in the planner, These are going to go up the sides and going to be the ones we start with. And then the wings will come in the front and cover over, and we'll staple this down. This is about to be the hardest part of this entire project, is installing the liner. To do this, you're going to need your liner, obviously, and a staple gun, preferably one that's connected to an air compressor so you don't get tired with all the staples you're about to put in. Here's how we do it. When placing the liner in the box, you want to keep your square ends available because that's where we're going to start. You can see that I'm stretching it out to the full length and walking it in, and this is me trying to center it and staple it. Now I'm only doing one staple right in the middle, and then I walk it down to the corner of the board. After I do that, then I start taking my stapler and expanding outward. Now I'm only doing the one side first, and then I go back to the other. I am not touching the part that has the wings. That's going to be the very last thing we staple. Now that I have the box size done, I'm going to start working on the sides with the flaps. I'm stretching it out. I'm using the same process of pulling it and trying to get it centered, following it in, and I'm going to put one staple in the middle and in the corner. As I move this liner, I realized I made a little bit of a mistake when I was assembling it. When I measured the support beams for the frame from the bottom, it was not supposed to be 15 inches to the bottom of the support beam, but yet to the top. So I am about 2 inches shy on each side. How I measured for this was side, base, side. And originally the sides were supposed to be 9 inches tall and an 18-inch base, which equals 36. So we'll cut that out, but don't do what I did. I'm following my same process. I started in the middle with the staple and I'm stretching my way to the outsides, stopping the top and then the bottom. When stapling your sides, you want to make sure your flats are parallel to the top of your planter box. You don't want them to overhang or fall short. I've gone as far as I can go without cutting out the excess of this material. So I'm cutting a little bit at a time, making sure that I don't accidentally overcut and leave an area of the planter bottom exposed to water and soil. And then I'm trying to staple it as I go. When you are stapling the liner to the bottom of the planter box, you'll do something similar to how you did the sides. You're going to start in the middle, you're going to work your way down, pulling taut on the liner and making sure that you're stretched out and that you don't have any gaps or raised areas. So you start in the center, kind of work your way out on a side and then go across, do your staples down the middle, work your way out and into the corners. At the very end, we staple the flaps. And again, make sure that they are parallel to the top of your planter box. Well, there you have it. When you do this correctly, you won't have near the difficulty that I had, but make sure when you're putting this in, when you're all done, you want to make a diagonal cut this way and a diagonal cut this way. So basically you're cutting little corner flaps, and we want those to kind of tuck in when we put the pole in instead of cutting this out. But since I had so much access, it was going to give me problems trying to put the 4x4 through the hole versus doing it the way I really wanted to do it, where you kind of cut at a diagonal, cut at a diagonal, and then you have these little corner flaps that will go under and help seal it. Now the next thing to do is we need to add some drainage holes for the planter box so that water can go through. Now because we're using kitty litter buckets, they're a little bit skinnier than a 5 gallon, so I'm going to try to keep my drainage holes to the sides so that way the water doesn't drain right back into my cement, holding my 4x4. So that's what I'm going to do next, is drill 4 holes through this liner and all the way through so that I can allow water to drain out. When drilling drain holes, I'm going to use 9/16 bit, and I'm actually going to use a scrap board. So if I take my drill bit and try drilling in here, I'm going to get caught up in the liner and it's going to spin and tear. But if you use a scrap piece of board and hold it down and drill through that, you won't have that problem. I have my boards on top. Now notice that I stained the underside and I flipped them. That way I don't have to do the work to stain underneath. I just stained them and flipped them upside down, so all I have to do is sand and stain the tops. Now I kind of got them laid out a little bit here, but I want to put one down before I start just drilling holes and everything. I'm using a countersink bit to help my screws go farther in. and then I can fill it with wood filler and sand it, and then you shouldn't be able to see the screws. So I'm just going to pick one of my corners, make sure it's lining up with one of my 2x3 boards underneath, and I'm going to pre-drill. Alright, now that I have this one board in place, I'm going to continue around and make sure that they all line up, and then I'll pre-drill those holes and put in a screw. Next, I installed the hooks into the post. I measured 1 3/4 in from the sides and from the top. Once you have your liner in your planter and the holes drilled for drainage, it's time to try to get the pole through the planter and into your bucket for concrete. And we're using kitty litter buckets. You can also use 5-gallon buckets for this. When you put the pole in, you want to have some gravel, or even if you have class 5, to put it around the hole for a base before you put in your concrete. For concrete, we're using our fast-setting Quikrete that you can get at Home Depot. This one works really well. You just pour it in after the pole's in, and then you add water. You don't have to stir it or mix it or do any of that. And that's one of the reasons we picked this one. If you're using a different variety of concrete, read the instructions and see how you mix that up before putting it in your pole. So keep an eye out on all the things that we do to try to get the pole through the planter, into the box, keeping it level, and getting the concrete to settle correctly. If you have 2 people to help you out with this, it makes it a lot easier. Once we had the pole in, I wanted to see how level it is. I'm using a pole level and attached it, and then we're making the adjustments to ensure that it's level before we're applying our gravel and concrete. Now we're adding our class 5, or you can use gravel, and I'm making sure that it goes all the way around the pole evenly. Now I'm adding the concrete. I did have a bag that was already opened, and so I wanted to use that up first before opening a new bag. Now that you've added the water, it's time to double check your pole and make sure nothing was moved, and then let it sit and let the concrete harden and do its job. When your concrete is finished drying, you can then lower your planter box down over the bucket and start to fill with dirt. And of course, add some pretty plants. To help support the lights, we also added a 9-gauge tension wire, and we ran that from pole to pole and then attached the lights to the tension wire as well as on the hooks of the pole, just for some added support. Thanks for watching Carly Tackles Planter Box Light Poles. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up, pass it along to your friends, and then add some comments at the bottom. If you are interested in any of the products that you've seen in this video, I did link them in the video description below. Using those links helps support the channel. If you'd like to see similar videos, please subscribe to my channel, Carly Tackles DIY, Tools and Gadgets, Tips and Tricks. Make sure to click the bell and get notifications when I release new video content.